Welcome to another OU Insider Under the Visor Sooners YouTube Live. My name is Brandon Drum. I'm here with Parker Thune, Spencer Forsythe on the board. And my God, did college football world get just shaken up not an hour and a half, 2 hours ago, Parker. And now all of us, even Sooners fans, have to sit around and wonder, does this mean that the dominoes are going to affect their coaching staff? We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk
Alabama
about the
head coach
transfer
Brent
portal.
Venables. Is that what I heard you say?
No, I'm talking like assistants and stuff like that. Like, come on, man, we're not doing this. Um, but can the domino effects roll in and cause some issues for Oklahoma? We're going to talk about the what ifs, the could possiblies, all that. This isn't sourced information; it's off-season banter, but we're going to have some fun with it, sort of. If you call getting anxiety fun, we're here for that. And then obviously we're going to talk about Oklahoma. The basketball team is playing TCU. They're down 2 with 7 minutes and 45 seconds left to go in the first half, 21-19. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the transfer portal. We're going to talk about a big junior day coming up at the end of this month. And the evaluation period is starting up next week as the coaches again hit the road. Camp season starts up here pretty soon for you and me, Parker. Just so much going on. There is no such thing, as Josh Pate says, as off season in college football anymore. And that's why we're here to talk college sports for you guys in recruiting all the time, every week. Can't wait to do it. But first, we have to get to some advertising. Parker, take it away.
That's right. This show is brought to you, folks, by Manscaped. Cheers to the new year from our friends at Manscaped, because your resolutions shouldn't be the only things that are well kept in 2024. It's the time for new heights, new opportunities, and a new look for your Times Square balls. Manscaped's Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra is every man's cheat code to look good, feel good, and turn the page on confidence this year. The 5th generation lawnmower isn't just a trimmer, it's your grooming sidekick, equipped with 2 skin-safe blade heads, a standard one for taking a little off the top, and a new foil blade to go smooth wherever your heart desires. It's like having a personal stylist at your fingertips, or, well, wherever you need it. And did we mention it's waterproof? Because a trim in the shower is the only way to start the day. And for men who want the full grooming experience, look no further than the Performance Package 5.0. You get the lawnmower, you get the ear and nose hair trimmer, you get the essential aftercare products with the Crop Soother Ball Aftershave Lotion and the Crop Preserver Anti-Chafing Ball Deodorant. Yeah, it's deodorant for your balls. You didn't think you needed that, but you do. As a gesture for the new year, they even threw in 2 free gifts, the Boxers 2.0 and the Shed 2.0 toiletry bag, because they know good and well you're still rocking your Boxers from high school. So get 20% off and free shipping with the code OU Insider at manscaped.com, because nothing says Happy New Year like a deal that leaves your balls and your budget feeling refreshed. Embrace a new you, and definitely embrace a new trimmer, courtesy of Manscaped.
There you go. New Year's balls. Gotta love it. I did not expect to hear that part, and it threw me off guard a little bit. You know what? I am gonna have to say that the deodorant part is it works, man. The non-chafing deodorant works. Just so a little TMI information for our listeners and watchers. There you go. Anyways, Parker, Nick Saban, 17 years at Alabama. The dude's won 6 national titles. He's an all-time great, like an all-time great. And I'm sitting here doing it. I was 23 when he got hired at Alabama, Parker. 23. I just turned 40
You want
earlier
to know
this
how old I was?
You were a baby.
I was 8. I was 8 when Nick Saban was head coach at Alabama, or was named head coach at Alabama. Excuse me. By
All
the way,
right.
for everybody in the YouTube comments complaining about the ad read, guess what, folks? You watch TV, you get 12 minutes of ads an hour. You listen to the radio, you get 16 minutes of ads an hour. On this YouTube show, guess what? You got a minute and a half of ads, and we're gonna give you an hour of nonstop Sooners content. So cool your jets. No more ad reads from here on out. it's all Sooners talk for the next hour
Yes, and
on this program.
let's also top this off here. It pays the bills if you want us to continue to go on and be able to provide information, to travel and do all the stuff that we have to do to provide the information, ads, subscriptions, like that's what helps us do that. And so that allows us to do the job that you all want us to do for you all. So just throwing that out there, But we do appreciate everybody. We do appreciate everybody because we do this job because of you guys. So sorry we had to do ad reads. Well, we do. We do. They are what they are. We will have more titled sponsors coming up later on this spring that we are working on that are going to be some big ones. So, which should, trim down the ads a little bit too, Parker. So that's going to help as well. Anyways, Nick Saban, Parker, you were 8 years old. I was 23, and he has been winning national titles ever since he got to Bama. He won a national title at LSU. He was a good coach for the Miami Dolphins. He obviously was a great defensive coordinator for the Cleveland Browns. He was a great head coach at Toledo. Like, the only reason why I know this is I've watched the Nick Saban and Belichick thing on HBO a few times, which is really, really cool. And I've watched the football life of Nick Saban on the NFL Network, or you can stream it on YouTube. It's a really cool deal, by the way. Love both of them. This whole deal, though, and I know people like this doesn't pertain to Oklahoma, but it might. It actually might. So let me tell you how this pertains to Oklahoma, potentially. Parker, you and I discussed it on the phone earlier. It's weird because if Alabama goes and hires Dabo Swinney, which I don't expect them to, but if they do, he's been a big candidate and he's been linked to Alabama when Nick Saban leaves for about a decade now. And so if that was to take place, the Clemson job opens up. And let me tell you, the first call that Clemson's going to make is to Brent Venables. Guaranteed. He just won 10 games. He's resurged the program. Oklahoma is now back to playoff contention with the 12-team playoff. It's crazy. And then on top of that, Todd Bates, let's say that Dabo gets the job, whoever gets the job at Alabama. If you don't think they're not going to call Todd Bates for defensive line coach, you're crazy. He played at Alabama. He's coached in that region for years. He knows that region. His family's around there. It makes sense. Now, would he leave Brent Venables? That's the other thing. He has one of the best classes coming in. He has the best defensive line class in the nation coming in. He has all of his guys coming back that he's recruited over the last 2 or 3 years, returning outside of Coe and Jordan Kelly, but he didn't recruit either one of those. So everybody he's recruited is coming back. I guess Bothroyd is the other one that's leaving, but that was a transfer portal guy. So they've built that defensive lineup. It is now of the talent at which he's used to coaching when he was at Clemson and what he's used to being around when he was at Clemson. So I think there's a lot of things that would keep him there. His kids are getting older. They really like living in Oklahoma. The families are really tight on the staff. There's a lot of things that make that a very hard deal. Him and Miguel Chavis are best friends. Him and Brandon Hall are really, really close to being best friends. There's a group of those guys that would be very difficult. But I don't think Venables is going to leave. I'm just saying that if that was to happen, the dominoes could affect Oklahoma. So that's why we're talking about this. The domino effect of this is going to be nonstop all the way to spring. And it's going to be nauseating for a lot of fans because whoever Alabama hires, they're going to take from somebody, which is going to end up taking from somebody else, which is going to take from somebody else until it gets so far down the line that they're going to hire lower level guys. And that could be 2 or 3 hires down the line, which means you have 10 people on staff. Every time that's 30 different coaches, whether position coaches, coordinators, whatever, that flipped around. Then you've got the analysts. So you're talking about potentially 300 different moves within the college football world like that. All because Nick Saban left Alabama. That's how crazy this is. And normally when jobs don't open up, it doesn't do that. But the jobs like Alabama, Oklahoma, Ohio State, Texas, Georgia, Clemson, Florida State, Oregon, US, like those are the jobs, Parker, that the domino effects are almost never ending for a while, right? Like they take a while to get caught up in the world of college football. So that is why we were talking about that. It's going to be a fun thing to watch. I'm going to enjoy it, but the GOAT has retired. That's big news across the board, right, Parker?
Yeah, no doubt. And now the natural question is, okay, does Alabama swing for the fences? Do they keep it internal? I think as it pertains to Oklahoma, the more interesting question is what kind of trickle down effect does it have on whatever program Alabama might swipe their next head coach from? I'll be honest. I think with Alabama replacing a living legend in Nick Saban, you have to swing for the fences, right? You have to go with somebody that's been a head coach and done it at a high level before, and that also brings a youthful energy to the program, right? You're probably not hiring somebody that's close to Saban's age bracket. The two names, and look, end of the day, I'm an Oklahoma insider, right? I don't claim to know the most about what is going on pertaining
Right.
to that Alabama coaching search, but I do know a few people who know some other people, and like you exist in this community. You hear things, right? And so I will say the two names that I've heard most credibly thus far on that Alabama vacancy are two names that you would very much expect to hear in relation to that Alabama vacancy: Dan Lanning and Steve Sarkisian. So, needless to say, if that happens, the impact on Oklahoma is probably minimal. And I think that's the best you can hope for, right? A seismic move like this at the very top of the college football food chain. You're just hoping that you stay insulated from it. Certainly OU fans are. And man, there are so many wheels in motion this week, Brandon. Obviously, the Alabama vacancy throws a whole new wrench into the calculus, but you have transfer portal movement or lack thereof in certain cases as things stand right now. You have, well, I would say that's probably A1 on everybody's list right now is the transfer portal movement. You got OU hoops going this Saturday to Allen Fieldhouse to try and snap that drought against the Jayhawks. You obviously have the pending hire of Zach Alley as defensive coordinator. It's coming. He's going to be your next defensive coordinator. We just don't know when it gets announced. So, man, it is a big news week. It is a big news week, not just at Oklahoma, but across all of college football. And you would expect nothing less these days. This is the era that we're
Right.
living in. It's never not a big news week in college football, but especially the week following the national championship game. Man, stuff's flying a million miles an hour.
Yeah, it's crazy these days. And I think most often, people want to talk about the transfer portal. And I know that the coaching world is still kind of fluid, and that's going to, I'm interested to see, because I don't, I was talking to somebody earlier around the Switzer Center before we got on here, and I asked them straight up because it was brought up on our board, right? And it was like, well, there's a 30-day grace period. The players can get in the portal and they can go wherever. And I said, well, does the SEC rule kind of get thrown out the window when it comes to this type of stuff? Are players allowed to transfer from SEC to SEC? Because it's not really the 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 players can't control the fact that Saban got retired after the portal window closed for players to transfer within the conference, right? And for those that don't know, the SEC after December, I think it's December 7th, right? I think is when it closed down, December 7th, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, whatever. The first week of December, you had to be in the portal or at least had your paperwork turned in, right? and you can transfer between September 1st and January 7th. You can transfer within the conference. Anytime after that, through January 8th all the way to August 31st, you cannot transfer from SEC school to SEC school. So I asked, I said, does that rule get negated now that Saban's retired? And there's that 30-day grace period for national letter of intents and the transfer portal for players that want to leave because their coaches are, they dispersed. And nobody really is sure on that front, which I think is kind of interesting. I think it's going to take I'm going to have to call the compliance office, obviously, and find out because they'll be able to tell us straight up. But none of the sources I talked to really understood that rule very well. But outside of that rule, like Oklahoma cannot get another SEC player. So every player that hits the portal from this point on has to be in the ACC, Big 12, or Big 10 or a G5 program moving forward, FCS. Like that's the rules, unfortunately. So, and Parker, what do you think of that rule? I kind of like it because it allows coaches within the conference to kind of most players want to stay in the SEC, right? That have played in the SEC, so it allows the coaches kind of know their roster going into the football season that way, more or less, outside of a few here or there.
Yeah, I just don't think. Look, these days the portal is so prevalent that as far as coaches knowing their roster, like you mentioned, how can any coach completely know their roster top to bottom these days? I mean, when you were a head
Yeah,
football coach, especially in the Power Five, and you have loads of responsibilities as is, and every single year you might be turning over at least a third and probably closer to half your roster when it comes to scholarship guys, in addition to walk-ons and grad assistants and student assistants, all the personnel. Man, it's got to be so hard to have Brent Venables' job. It's got to be so hard to have any P5 head coach's job. Man, I don't envy what they do. And
yeah.
for those, and I know there are a lot of people that would love to have our jobs, Brandon. Our jobs are not really all that glamorous when you
Mhm.
get to understand what we're doing day to day. And it is a lot of work, a lot of travel, a lot of time away from family, and a lot of nights spent in hotel rooms, all that type of stuff. But even so, man, it is a drop in the bucket compared to everything that has to constantly be on the mind and on the agenda for a Power Five head football coach. If it
Yeah,
wasn't already the toughest job in the sport of football, I think it certainly is now in today's day and age with the transfer portal, this new multi-transfer provision that has been legislated in federal court, and NIL, man. I was talking to I was talking to a Power Five position coach a while back who said, "Man, I'll be 100% straight with you. I try to deal with NIL as little as possible. I don't care what guys are getting paid. I don't want to know what guys are getting paid because
hmm
I've got
that's the
enough on my plate
consensus.
as it is. I just don't want to know. I'm
That's the
better off not knowing."
consensus across the board from every coach that I've ever spoken with. They're kind of like they don't want to deal with it. Obviously, they're not supposed to deal with it, and therefore they kind of have an out and an excuse like, yeah, we don't deal with that. You got to go call this guy over here. Like, we'll give you the number of who you can call from the NIL people and general manager and whoever that they go through. But outside of that, it's like right now it's Curtis Lofton. He deals with a lot of
Yep.
the NIL like stuff like that and talks to the players, and he's kind of the middleman on all that type of stuff right now for Oklahoma, which is makes it easier for the coaches and Brent Venables. He doesn't have to deal with all that. And I think college football is moving in that. And I think that's something that Saban was so mad at where college football was headed. That's generally why he left. And he even
No,
his
that's
wife
not
and
that's not why he left.
well, it's one of the reasons why he left because I talked to a coach that knows a few people down there that he does not like where college football's headed. Like he does not like the NIL. He doesn't
And
dislike NIL, but he doesn't like that there's not any rules behind it, essentially, that there's
okay,
no
well,
governing body. And so
I'm
there's a
sure, yeah, I'm sure there's truth to that. I'm not questioning. Obviously, like it's hard to look at college football right now and not feel a little bit apprehensive about where it's headed. But Nick Saban's still at the top of the sport, and I'll be straight
no,
up
he
with
is,
you.
but he even
Yeah,
made note of it. His wife and him even made note of it, that like the rules and how the world works in college football has changed, but the process remains the same. Uh, when it comes to their program, like they took a little. If you read into it, they took a little, you know, snaps at it and said what their piece is, and he's been publicly very um
called out Jimbo Fisher, that's for sure. I
well,
remember
yeah, I
that.
mean that's not all. Like he's been very, he wants just all he wanted was some governing. Like that's all he wanted, is that there to be rules and some a governing body over it. And what I was about to say is I think college football is moving to the world of general managers
Yeah.
being the ones that kind of do the personnel, and the coach just kind of, they're in charge with the general manager and they work hand in hand, but the coach doesn't have to be the one that processes or cuts them. The
Mm-hmm.
general manager will be the one that does it, because it kind of gives the head coach an out. So I it's there's going to be a lot of changes. Josh Pate talked about on his last stuff, the last video that he had, and there's big changes coming. What, when, how, I don't know, but they think before this next season, there's going to be some changes that we look at and we're like, okay, well, things are starting to come together a little bit. Um, and I'm not saying that's why he left, but I think that's a piece of it. I think he got tired of it, right? Like he may have been on top of it, but it wasn't the same as when he rose to the top, right? Like the way the college football recruiting worked, the calendar years, like everything was just all jacked up. Um, and speaking of, like right now, Oklahoma's waiting on two offensive linemen, right? Like
That
they're
they
still
are.
waiting,
Segue.
and they're also waiting on a potential quarterback to announce. Like I think we when that announcement's going to happen, I mean, it keeps getting drawn further out and further out and further out. It's getting kind of weird, but we'll start with the Casey Thompson stuff. Like he's been in Florida. He should be arriving to wherever he's going to go. Um, over the next few days, he's had to move. So everything's being taken care of as far as that, because he was at FAU. He's got like a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment that he's had to move from in Boca Raton. So there's a lot of things that are in the works there, and we expect an announcement to happen potentially by the end of this week. And then on top of that, you're waiting on you know, Lance Hurd and obviously Terrence Ferguson, offensive tackle Hurd, and then offensive guard and Ferguson. Parker, I'll let you talk about it. My understanding is that FSU and OU are kind of battling for Terrence Ferguson right now,
Yep.
and it's an
With
Ole Miss Tennessee OU battle for Lance Hurd.
yes.
And I'll let
And
you expand on that.
well, and I was told Sunday night and talking with a source that there does seem to be a decent chance that Terrence Ferguson returns to Alabama, but obviously that conversation is entirely obsolete now with as much as happened at Alabama. So I don't know how realistic of an option that is right now for Terrence Ferguson. I know it was a realistic option on Sunday. Not sure how much Saban's departure changes. But yeah, Florida State is the other school in the mix for Terrence Ferguson. And then, you think about the the Lance Hurd situation, and he was on campus with OU over the weekend, but you were dealing with two schools in Ole Miss and Tennessee, Brandon, that absolutely have, well, I shouldn't say they have no scruples. They are much more liberal in the way that they spend NIL funds. I'll
Well, they
just
only
go.
pay a certain amount of players though too. Oklahoma pays 100 players on their roster and still pays people six. I want people to understand this, Parker. OU offers six figures to everybody that warrants a six-figure offer. Like they give competitive offers. Like we're not just talking like $100,000. Like we're talking six-figure offers. But when people are throwing seven-figure offers at kids, Oklahoma's not going to do that. Like there's nobody outside of a few quarterbacks that are worth that in college football, Parker. They just aren't. Would you agree with that? Like it's college football, man. Like I get,
Well, and I will
go
say
ahead.
this. If people knew, and it's not my place to throw the numbers out there are a lot of reasons why we don't ever actually say the numbers, Brandon. But if people knew how much was on the table for Zalance Hurd at Ole Miss and Tennessee, I think they would understand why Oklahoma has pretty much gotten to the point in that process where they're like, okay, this is what we will offer you. Take it or leave it. Because, I mean, we're talking about stupid large figures here.
Yes. No, it's and the thing is like Oklahoma's throwing out and there's people like I read a comment just now like, oh, you pays people to just hold practice dummies, and blah blah blah, and they're not paying this and that. Bull. So let me poke a hole in that theory really quick. Do you think two guys that got second and third round offer or grades are returning to play at the University of Oklahoma just for pennies on the dollar? If you don't think the NIL isn't paying them, the collective's not paying them a pretty penny, you're crazy. You're crazy. And if you don't think that OU didn't win some very big battles to go get Deion Burks, you're crazy. David Stone. Like there's so many, like you don't have the type of recruiting classes that Oklahoma has put together and not be competitive in NIL. You don't get some of the transfer portal guys that they've gotten over the years and not be competitive in NIL. You're not going to get everybody that you want. And Oklahoma isn't going to just throw around. What's going to happen? I know, Parker, you and I discussed this on the phone. Ole Miss, Tennessee, the staffs are kind of leaning on the fact that they feel like if there's not enough really good players in the portal, because that's what they basically build their programs around, right? Is portal stuff at this juncture. If there's not enough guys in the portal, then you just go tamper and you can get guys to get in there by going around and back channeling and offering. Yeah, that's great and all. But the thing is if they're really good players, most of the programs, kind of like Oklahoma with a lot of their top players, they are paying them to stay. So it's very hard to get the top players from the top programs because the top programs are paying their top players. And so there's going to be a time if you don't want to recruit in the high school ranks the way Oklahoma has, the way Georgia does it, the way Alabama does it, the way Ohio State does it. Like they've built, even Oregon, they've built through the high school ranks, right? Like they're building up through the high school ranks. Texas is doing that. Michigan's doing that. They're not going out and just grabbing a bunch of portal stuff. They're developing and making long-term development and growth through the program because that's the only way you can sustain success is by continually recruiting well at the high school ranks. It's great. Go grab a portal guy here, a portal guy there to fill in. But building your whole roster off top portal guys is short-term success, Parker. It is.
Yes.
Like for the I want to win now guys and the people, it's got to happen now and I don't want to wait to go play for the national title. Yeah, that might work. But what happens when all those guys graduate? Now you got to start all over. You got to get that cohesive unit again. Eventually, that type of work is going to fail because you can't keep a culture that way. Because you're just throwing new people in over and over and over and over. The NFL doesn't even. The pros don't do that. A lot of times the players are there for 6, 7, 8 years, right? Like they're long term. That it's not sustainable, man. It's not sustainable. What Ole Miss is doing is awesome. What Tennessee's doing is awesome. But is it sustainable? We haven't been able to see that yet. If it is sustainable, good for them. Good for them. But if I guarantee you this, if Alabama offers Lane Kiffin the job, he's leaving everything that he built at Ole Miss because guess what? It's easier to recruit high school guys at Alabama. Period. Am I wrong?
I mean, it's easier to do your job at Alabama than anywhere else right now.
Yeah, no doubt. I just, you just got me on that tangent because yes, those programs are paying crazy, but they only pay 15, 20, 25 guys a cycle. Where the Alabamas of the world, the Oklahomas, the Georgias, the Ohio States, they pay everybody on their roster. Like everybody's getting a piece of the pie. That's the difference. That's why you don't see those guys go after and pay for a lot of these ridiculous amount players, right? Like and I'm not saying Hurd and Ferguson are ridiculous amount players. They kind of are, but I want you to expound on why you still think Oklahoma has a chance with Hurd, though, because you and I talked about it on the phone. Can you kind of elaborate on that a little bit? So for people that are kind of jumping the gun, like, oh, we just got outbid, talk a little bit more about that.
I mean, Bill Bedenbaugh, right? I mean,
There you go. Yep.
that is your pitch. Like once you have a substantial NIL offer to put before a guy like that, and Oklahoma does with Zalance Hurd, then what you have to leverage if you know your offer is not as large and frankly cannot and should not be as large as the offers that he's going to have at places like Alabama and Tennessee, then what you have to lean on is what your position coach, in this particular case, Bill Bedenbaugh, has done over the course of his career and especially his tenure at Oklahoma to make that player believe that they are better off in the long term saying no to a couple of bucks over the next 2 years if it means making several more $1 million down the line. That's Oklahoma's pitch, especially with offensive linemen in the portal. OU is probably never going to be the school, and this is by design once again. OU is probably never going to be the school that offers a kid the most in NIL money. They're probably never going to have the largest sheer dollar amount to put before a kid. But what they can lean on and what they can leverage, especially with offensive linemen, is, hey, here's the laundry list of dudes that have played for Bill Bedenbaugh and have gone on to make huge money in the NFL. Orlando Brown, Cody Ford, Drew Samia, Ben Powers, Anton Harrison, Wanye Morris, Creed Humphrey. The list goes on and on and on. And so that, like, it's a viable pitch to somebody like Zalance Hurd. But what you must keep in mind, right, is that you're dealing with 19 and 20-year-old kids.
Mm-hmm.
And 19 and 20-year-old kids, I was 19, 20 not all that long ago, Brandon. I can attest to this. When you're that age, you probably I guess what I'm saying is it takes a very mature 19, 20-year-old to listen to those contrasting pitches from an Oklahoma versus an Ole Miss or a Tennessee and count on the investment that you're making at a place like Oklahoma in declining some of those upfront funds, to count on that investment paying off in the long term. Not a whole lot of 19 and 20-year-olds are all too eager to do that, and that's where their circle of influence comes in, right? If they have the right people in their corner telling them, hey, don't make this decision strictly in the here and now, but consider what it's going to do for you 5, 10, 20 years down the road, then that's where a program like Oklahoma has the legit chance to be competitive in the race for a kid like Zalance Hurd. So again, I don't know which way this is going to go because I don't know what decision the kid's ultimately going to make, but the decision is pretty straightforward. Do you want the money now, or do you want to bet on yourself, give it all you got for Bill Bedenbaugh for the next 2-3 years, and count on reaping enormous benefits that blow away what you're going to make as a collegian if you end up being a first or second round NFL draft pick, like so many players at Oklahoma have been under Bill Bedenbaugh. So that's the difference in philosophy. That's what is before Lance Hurd and Terrence Ferguson as well, for that matter. And what the ultimate decision is, I don't know, right? Because there's a compelling case to be made on both sides. We're all kind of waiting to see, and we're all kind of on the same timetable here. We're all kind of finding everything out at the same speed, I feel. But we're just waiting on the decision, whatever that may be, from Hurd and Ferguson.
So every time I hear people say Hurd and Ferguson, all I can think of is Norm Macdonald's.
Norm Macdonald, yeah.
Yeah,
Hurd Ferguson.
Anyways, so the Burt Reynolds stuff was hilarious. Why don't they have Wanya Morris give him a call? Like if all things are equal and Tennessee is really that big of a player right now, why would you not have Wanya Morris call and be like, look, dude, I wasn't going to get drafted. I went to Oklahoma and I was drafted in the 3rd round. I made millions and millions more dollars than I ever would if I hadn't gone to Oklahoma. Like if I stay at Tennessee, I'm not making money right now. Like, why would you not do that if you're Oklahoma? Like, that seems like the best salesman pitch. Like, you can kind of just have everybody that's transferred in just kind of give them a call and be like, look, if I didn't go to Oklahoma and play for Bill Bedenbaugh, I'm not in the NFL right now. And or getting drafted. Like Walter Rouse, right? Wanya Morris. Trying to think of like who all else transfer portal guys. I'm kind of drawing a blank here, but there's been several like that have made their way and ended up making it to the league after they went to Oklahoma. So why would you not do that? That to me is the best sales pitch you can make, right? It's peer-to-peer sales.
Is that a rhetorical question?
I guess so. I mean, I'm asking your opinion on it.
No, I mean, I especially because that is what you're leaning on, NFL development and your penchant for putting guys in the league. Yeah, you go get those guys in the league. You get them on the phone if you can swing it with
Trent
Lancer.
Williams.
Let him know. Yeah, exactly.
Lane Johnson.
I mean, shoot. Trent Williams was heavily involved in the Peyton Kirkland recruitment. We know how that one turned out. So it's not always effective. But
No.
I mean, you have the resources, you use them.
Yeah. So FSU, I guess I just read on there. Florida State, Ferguson is Parker's reported that Oklahoma has a better chance with Hurd than they do with Ferguson right now. Like that's been on the OU Insider message board since 3:00 this afternoon. So,
well, I don't necessarily. I don't know that I would say they have a better chance with Hurd than with Ferguson. They have an adequate chance with both players, though I would not consider them the favorite for either one.
Yeah. People are like, that's a terrible pitch. Yeah, Tyler Guyton would be the other one, right? I'm gonna be a 1st-round pick. I transferred from TCU to Oklahoma, and now I'm probably gonna be a 1st-rounder. There's some people that have him going early, like top 15, top 16 picks, which I think is just crazy.
I don't think he'll go quite that high.
Me either. I think that's wild. There's been a lot of people asking questions about Zach Alley, and let me clear this up for everybody. He's been in Norman since Friday. Oklahoma takes a while to announce things. If you go back and you look at Venables in his hiring, remember it took like 10 days for them to announce his hiring, right? And everybody knew he was the next head coach. Brandon Hall, everybody knew he was a safety coach. It took like 10 days after that news was broke. Bates, it took like a week and a half, 7, 8 days for that to come out before, and everybody had already said he's coming to Oklahoma. So it just takes time. Oklahoma is very, very methodical in their announcements. They make sure every T is crossed, every I is dotted. And this is a quote from a source, because Joe C is very, very particular about how they do things. Uh, Very rule structured, very, they don't want anything to come back on them, whether legally, whether wording in the contract, everything. It's got to be perfect before they announce. So, um, I think you'll hear something from Mike Hauk and the SID, for the football program here pretty soon. I would assume by the end of this week, I would guess. So, if not the beginning of next week, but it's gonna happen, guys. Just it's okay. Everything's okay. Um, he's in town. He's working. I think they're trying to get this thing done before the evaluation period hits, so he can hit the road and start recruiting right off the bat, which totally makes sense. Which means he has to go through a lot of videos with compliance, and every time you go from school to school, you have to go through all the compliance regulations and all the forms and all the videos and what you can do and what you can't do and the rules and regulations with the NCAA and with the recruits and transfer portal and all that type of stuff. And it's got to be signed off on. So it takes time. Oklahoma is a little bit more methodical than everybody else. So just deep breaths on that one. Great hire. We haven't talked about that since it's happened, obviously. So Parker, thoughts on Zach Alley, defensive coordinator?
We talked about it quite a bit on the podcast, and to kind of rehash my
Yeah,
overarching
I guess
thoughts,
live.
uh, I think I think in terms of having somebody that is capable of taking the reins of Brent Venables' defense and running it exactly as Venables himself would run it, there are few, if any, more qualified to do so than Zach Alley. Now,
Mhm.
this hire makes sense in the long term if what you're trying to do is shift your focus from the defense, most specifically, to being a head coach. And Brent Venables has had to be very involved in the you would expect nothing less from Brent Venables, right? But he's been heavily involved in the defensive game planning and scheming and execution in his first 2 years on the job. That's not going to be able to last forever, though, because he's got a lot on his plate as a coach, making a transition in the SEC at the helm of one of the blue blood programs in college football. And so when Venables made the decision to bring in Zach Alley, I think the reasons were twofold. One, you get younger on staff, which is never a bad thing in today's day and age. You got to be able to connect with recruits. You got to be able to have somebody that's got a bit of a dynamic personality. And look, Ted Roof is a great coach, great man, always been good to me. Uh, Zach Alley is half Ted Roof's age, right? And so
Yes.
you would figure that it's only natural that Allie would be able to connect a little bit easier with 15, 16, 17-year-old kids because he's closer to their generation, right? There's not as much of a divide there. And so you get younger on staff. You bring in somebody that you would presume will be at Oklahoma in the long run. This is the biggest job Zach Alley has ever had. It's his first coordinator gig in the Power Five. And so Brent Venables, we know, is planning on being at Oklahoma in the long run. I think with Zach Alley coming in to be your defensive coordinator, you can count on him being at Oklahoma just as long, if not longer, than Brent Venables. Right?
Yeah.
Because especially given that his formative years as a coach were spent under Venables, this is not the type of deal where he's going to make a lateral move for more money or something like that. And if you know
Mhm.
Zach Alley's background, he doesn't need money, right? He doesn't. That's not what he's in it. That's not what he's in the coaching business for. So I I like the hire because I think it is a long-term solution, and we knew Ted Roof was a short-term stopgap. And you go from short-term stopgap to a guy that could potentially, I mean, best case scenario, be at Oklahoma for a decade or longer, as Venables was his first time around in the Crimson and Cream. And
Mhm.
also, man, I think if this is a good hire, we'll be able to tell really quickly, Brandon, because
Yeah.
all the pieces are there for this Oklahoma defense to be very good in 2024. Very good. So if Zach Alley is that dude when it comes to scheming and game planning and play calling, we're going to be able to see it because it is not as if he is walking into a situation where the cupboard is bare. Far from it. Far from it. He's walking into a situation where he has personnel at all three levels defensively to churn out a national top 25 unit in 2024.
No, on paper, it is just one of the better defenses that Oklahoma's had in a long time, honestly. And when you add what they're obviously bringing in, um, not just through the portal, but through the recruiting ranks and the high school ranks, the best defensive line class in 2024 across the board, uh, the best defensive lineman in the nation. They got the top edge rusher the year before, and PJ Adebora, and then you've got obviously Nigel Smith, you've got Jaden Jackson, Wyatt Gilmore, you got young guys like Ashton Sanders and Grayson Haltom, and like there's a lot that they're building off of, right? Like they've got some really really good pieces, and so if you're Oklahoma, you look at that and you're Zach Alley, you look at that and you go, okay, well, I think I can. This is going to be the best accumulation of talent that he's dealt with. Now, he's obviously going to be playing the best accumulation of talent that he's ever played against week in and week out as well. So that's going to be quite different than ULM and Jackson State. But still, at both those programs, he put together a very formidable defense that gave South Carolina some problems, gave, you know, Liberty some issues, right? And when you look at what he has to use at Jacksonville State, he's kind of got two hands tied behind his back, right? Like as far as a play caller and talent that he has on the field, it's not up to snuff than what he's going to have, obviously in Norman and what he's played against with some of these other programs as they move up in the FBS ranks, right? So I like the move. Young can get in the SEC. He's been recruiting down in that region for years. He's been around Brent Venables, so he understands how to recruit the defensive side of the ball, what they're looking for, what type of players fit in that system that they use. So I think as a whole, it's just a really, really good hire. Now you're losing some experience with Ted Roof, and I know people kind of dislike Ted Roof a little bit sometimes. Like you said, he's been great to you and me. Like he was such a good guy to deal with. And I always hate seeing people lose their jobs, period. But I also want people to understand like he was a good recruiter and he had connections. When you're talking about Georgia and Florida and South Carolina, Alabama, there's not very many people that are as connected as Ted Roof in those regions. He's been doing it for a long time down there, whether it's a head coach or defensive coordinator. So that to me, I think there's going to be an adjustment period, right? Like Zach Alley's going to have to work to get into some of those places that Ted Roof could just walk in and here he is with that OU logo. And I think it's going to be interesting, Parker. I want your thoughts on this. Zach Alley recruiting with an OU logo. Like that's going to be different with his age, with his energy, and you actually have a blue blood logo on your chest now when you walk through the door.
Yeah. Well, and to be honest with you, Brandon, I'm not really sure that's a judgment we're going to be able to make very immediately at all because you look at the 2025 class for Oklahoma. You have one linebacker committed in Marcus James. You have another guy committed that can play linebacker, and I think probably will in Trinae Washington. You have a third in Christian Thatcher that, I mean, isn't technically committed to Oklahoma, but he's given every indication for a long, long time that he plans to matriculate in Norman, Oklahoma. So you're already pretty set in the 2025 class, the linebacker position. it's on to 2026 at this point. That
Yeah.
2026 cycle is, and gosh, man, it feels like just yesterday, all those 2023 kids were freshmen, and 2023 feels like a long way, or felt like a long way off. And now we're talking
No
about
joke.
2026 kids. Ugh, not even, gosh, time flies, time flies. But that 2026 class, I think, is where we're going to find out what Zach Alley's made of as a recruiter. And you know what? I can't imagine he will struggle with the OU logo on his chest as a recruiter, but I don't know, right? Like it's all speculation. We're just throwing darts. What we know about Zach Alley is that he's apparently a Brent Venables clone,
Mm-hmm.
and that he's going to be recruiting a different caliber of athlete for a different caliber of institution than he has ever recruited before. All good things, right? All things that should add up to a ton of success on the trail, but we might not see the tangible yields for another cycle
Right.
to come.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think that this staff as a whole, yeah, you're losing Roof, which is going to stink a little bit in the SEC region. Maybe to start out as Zach Alley, gets his legs. But if Oklahoma can continue to win and build off the 10-3 season they just had, to me it just feels like things are starting to trend in the direction that everybody thought they were going to when Venables was hired. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that I don't expect there to be some pitfalls and some bumps in the road and all that type of stuff as they go into the SEC. That'd be naive to say that. But on the other hand, I do think that this team next year, with all the experience they have, and I know that there's some that want to sit there and say, well, if they don't have the offensive line, it doesn't matter. I'm going to throw this out there to everybody. Your offensive line starting is offensive tackle Spencer Brown, let's say left guard Fabici Nawawu, center we'll just say Everett, right guard we'll say Tarquin, right tackle we'll say Sexton, and you can flip the tackles because I really think Sexton's
Yeah.
probably going to be your
Sexton's
left
a
tackle.
left, Spencer Brown's a right.
Yeah, so either way, that's a really good offensive line. One, Everett's got a lot of experience. When I say really good, I'm talking like experience wise. Like Everett's got a ton of experience when he was at App State, obviously. Does he need to get better, stronger, bigger at Oklahoma? Yes, but he's got 9 months to do that. Spencer Brown has always had all the potential. He's just never really been developed. He kind of reminds me of Orlando Brown. We talked about this on the phone, Parker, where he's very, very just he plays with an edge and it gets him in trouble sometimes, whether false starts or holding or whatever, like personal fouls. And Bingbo's been really good about harnessing that edge, letting you keep it, but making you also be disciplined. And if he can do that with Spencer Brown, I think you've got a decent, right tackle. Nawawu, I think, is kind of the sleeper in all this. I think he's going to be good. I think he's going to be
I
really
think
good.
he'll be a stud.
Yeah,
Amongst interior guys that you would project to start next year, Nawawu is probably the one I'm least worried about.
me too. And then you got Tarquin, who has been playing out of position at USC. I always believe that Beanbo's going to find his guy. Now, I won't be shocked if by game 5 you don't see BJ Brooks out there starting instead of Tarquin. Like that wouldn't shock me. He's a rising star. It won't shock me if Akinkumi's in the rotation, like another rising star on the offensive line. It won't shock me if Eddie Pierre Louis isn't one of those guys starting out there. Like that
I
guy is
mean,
a freak.
let me throw you another sleeper. Heath Ozida.
That yeah,
Don't think you
exactly.
should
That
discount
think yeah,
Heath
yep.
Ozida either.
Yes, Ozida, yep. So I think the offensive line is going to be better than people think. I still think you're going to have issues, but I don't think it's like down in the dumps the way people are like making it out to be like it's the worst ever. Like they've got 9 months to solidify this stuff. And what's your thoughts on that, Parker?
My thoughts are this. As long as Bill Bedenbaugh is the offensive line coach, I'm not really worried about the offensive line at the University of Oklahoma. I don't know what it's going to look like next year. I have an idea. I think Noah is going to be one of your starting guards. I think Sexton is going to be your starting left tackle. Outside of those two, man, it could be a multiplicity of guys that end up drawing the starting role at the other positions. But what I don't question is that regardless of what that lineup looks like, Bedenbaugh is going to find a solution that both protects Jackson Arnold and paves the way for the running backs in the run game. Because regardless of who it's been over the years, Brandon, regardless of who has comprised the starting five for Oklahoma up front in the offensive trenches, Oklahoma has never struggled up front.
No.
They've never struggled. Now, there have been years where they have struggled with penalties. Sure. A lot of that was on the shoulders of a couple of guys. There
Yep.
have been years where maybe you had a bit of a revolving door at one or more spots. But in the grand scheme of things, you look at the statistics, you look at the metrics, you look at every measurable way to gauge offensive line play. Oklahoma has had, at worst, a solidly above average offensive line under Bill Bedenbaugh, and at best,
Yep.
an elite one. So I do not know who makes up the starting five on the offensive line next year at Oklahoma. What I do know is that Bill Bedenbaugh is their coach, and that Bill Bedenbaugh is going to find a group of five guys that collectively are capable of holding their own up front and helping Oklahoma win football games. That is not something I question in the slightest. And
Yeah.
unless you're a doomer of an OU fan, I don't think it's something you should question either. Because when has Bill Bedenbaugh ever steered you wrong?
The fans will find something. You've just opened up a Pandora's box there with that question. No, he missed out on this player. He didn't get Grant Bricks. He steered us wrong on that, and blah blah. That's where that one's gonna go. And there you go. The bowl game. The bowl game says otherwise. As far as he steered him wrong, he threw a makeshift offensive line in 2 weeks. Man, like, come on, like. And Connor said this to me. I'm a doomer. Well, yes. Anyways, and Brian Bates says this year. So it's Parker. You're not going to win that one. Like, if they're not winning Joe Moore awards, they're the worst offensive line of all time. Like that's the way it is, man. Just let it go. Let it go. Anyways, does OU pull this one out? They're down 8. I waited till he
I'm
made
not
that free
watching
throw.
the game right now. I have it on in the other room, but
13:45 left in the second half, 47-55. Hughley's at the line right now with his second free throw. Could put Oklahoma within 7. Turnovers, which has been an Achilles heel for this Oklahoma team. When they struggle, they turn the ball over a lot. They play out of control sometimes. So, anyways, um, I guess the junior day before we close this thing out, the junior day.
yeah, let's hit that.
Yeah, it's January 27th. Jonah Williams is going to be in town. 5-star safety. Amari Robinson's going to be in town. 4-star safety out of Arkansas. I believe Deshaun Brame's going to be in town. Obviously, Kevin Sperry. All the Carl Albert guys that are committed. Elijah Thomas. Like, there's a lot to like if you're. Wow. There's a lot to like if you're Oklahoma when it comes to that list.
That
And it's gonna
list
is gonna
also
be
is
awesome.
it's expanding rapidly
Yep.
by the day. Caleb Cunningham, 5-star wide receiver from
Yes.
the
Yep.
state of Mississippi. He's going to be there. Just confirmed tonight. Cole Breeler, defensive lineman from New Jersey,
Boom.
He's
Yep.
in town on the 27th. Yeah, all across the board, man. And that's, if you're on OU Insider, you know Jonah Williams and Caleb Cunningham. Those aren't the only 5 stars showing up either. They are
No,
not.
and
So
by the way, Breeler, this is his second trip in like 3 months, 2 months, 2 months, because he was there at the final OU game, wasn't he? The TCU game. Was it TCU
attends,
or was it which one was it? It was the
I
night
believe it
game.
was the TCU game.
Yeah, it was the night game. Yep. So
Um, he attends the same high school up in New Jersey that produced Logan Howland. So there
there you
is an
go.
OU inroad there. That's
Ton.
definitely a name to watch in the 2025 class as well. So, yeah, look, we got you covered on OUinsider.com. That is the place to be. And with as much information as you get on this YouTube Live, with as much information as you get from everything that we do on the free side, trust me, you spend the few dollars a month to subscribe over at OUinsider.com. It's going to be well worth your while. I love,
Yeah.
we were asking some of our members earlier in the week, hey, why do you subscribe? Why are you loyal to OU Insider? And I love the fact that somebody brought it up because it's 100% true. One of our members said, man, everybody that only follows recruiting on Twitter thinks they know everything just as quick as everybody that subscribes on OUinsider.com, but they don't. And oftentimes, by the time they do, things have changed. And so there is not a better way to stay up to date, day to day, week to week, hour to hour on all things OU recruiting than OUinsider.com. That is the spot this offseason. We will have you covered every single day.
Yeah, and look, people are sitting here saying, well, and I agree with you on all that. I love our site. We do a really good job, I feel like. And there were so many when you put that up there that, you know, just give us a testimony of why you like OU Insider. There's so many people that responded, which I thought was really cool. Bagman on here says Bill shouldn't be immune to criticism. You act like he's Jesus Christ of O-line coaching. Well, he is the best offensive line coach in college football. So, but nobody is sitting there saying he's immune to criticism. Like that's ridiculous. Like when the offensive line struggled, we've said they've struggled, but to make 1 or 2 or 3 games encompass a whole season is just it's crazy. Like, and that's what some fans do. Like those 1, 2, 3 games that were bad, so the whole season was bad. They didn't play well that whole season. And that's where we're coming from on that. So two things can be the same, right? And it just, I don't know. That's where we're coming from. Anyways, all right. We have like this Brian Bates guy's driving me nuts tonight. All right. Anyways, that's going to do it for this version of the OU Insider Under the Visor Sooners podcast. If you're not on OU Insider, go over there, $9.95 for a month. Give us a try. Lots going on right now. Transfer portal, junior days, coaches going about out to eval. We're going to talk about all that. Obviously, basketball coverage with Jesse and Brody. Brian Clinton's got a lot of the transfer portal breakdown of the players and his coaching knowledge, and breaks down the pros and the cons of all the players and all that type of stuff. So, anyways, go there, $9.95 a month, or you can go the whole year and get all the way through next year's national title game if you join us, which means you'll get all the way through the inaugural SEC season, $99.95 for the whole season. All right, that's going to do it for this version of the OU Insider Under the Visor Sooners YouTube Live. For Parker Thune, my name is Brandon Drum. You guys have a blessed day.